and adapt to our own cultural setting. I mean, that's really what we're after.
Yeah. So I think making sure we make the focus on biblical and theological priorities first, when we realize that, we can build everything best around them. So I think we always have to first think about our biblical and theological focus, and then flush everything else around it. And I think, unfortunately, the discussion tends to not start there, and instead we tend to force the biblical and theological truths that we hold dear onto something that we've already decided. But I think with that, you should set vision of kids or youth ministry with Scripture, and I think. Yeah, sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, set a vision of your kids or youth ministry with Scripture. And I think you really reinforce that and make it all about that. One area in which we try to do this at our church is we make sure that every time that we have a meeting of children or youth or whatever ministry, we want to start with a little devotion, something that's from Scripture that's going to guide what we do. And I ask all of our youth leaders to read a really healthy book by Brian Cosby, Reclaiming Youth from an Entertainment Culture. Giving Up Gimmicks actually is the main title. And I think when you use those kind of things to focus, rather than first and foremost focusing on what objects we're trying to achieve, rather than what vision we're focusing on, you will really, I think, head more in a healthy direction.
I like the idea, setting the tone for those meetings with something, keeping that at the forefront. Because we're not there to entertain kids, or just, keep them off the streets, keep them out of trouble, make good Christian citizens or whatever. And I think that just feeds into what I was, thinking along these lines, that, we have to know the Bible, grow in our knowledge and our understanding of it, and also interact with others, get feedback and wisdom from others, and even those with whom you might disagree. Because, I have moved some on this with time, just trying to consider all that's involved in it. And, like I'll say, we're remodeling our big kids ministry area room, our primary one, where it's in the works. Nothing's actually happened that you can see yet, but there's stuff going on behind the scenes. And that is not my thing. Like in college, it was funny because my roommate, for most of the time, his dad traveled all over the place, all over the world for business, and so he had stuff from these different places. And then you look over at my side, and there was like one picture frame, and that was it. I just that's not my thing, and so I feel very uncomfortable. And I'm like, man, this is the money in my wallet's the Lord's money just as much as the money in the church's account is, but it is a little different. And so I'm trying to be careful as we think through that and go, okay, well, this is how are we using this best to make disciples, to bring glory to Jesus, and not just we're going to make this awesome, and the kids are going to be just amazed. But I think you definitely seek for God's wisdom in applying scriptural truths, and don't just look at what some other church is doing and go, oh, that looks cool, let's do that, and adopt it uncritically, or just what's getting apparent results through high attendance. So what counsel would you give to parents as they might be considering going to a church? Maybe they move to a new area, or they're staying put in their area, but they're looking at a church that might appeal more to their own or their kids' consumer taste. What kind of grid should they use in processing through that decision?
Yeah, I think I'd say a few things to them. I would say, before I give the grid, I would advise that they're setting a dangerous precedent by making that kind of decision, that we react to their consumer desires rather than setting a vision for them, and we're maybe only delaying an inevitable fallout into something bigger rather than actually solving the issue. I think oftentimes at the best thing that they're really doing is delaying a dropout or delaying a disinterest in church rather than solving the issue. And I would ask what they think it communicates to their kids, because I think kids pick up on things more than we realize, and kids grow their theology based upon how you make decisions, even for the family's church, and I think it's not going to be helpful. I would warn, if we don't fight consumerism in a matter that is this important as where you go to church, we may end up giving up the whole tide of consumerism in almost every aspect of life. And we know how devastating consumerism can be. Then I would say in making a decision and having a decision grid, way more in things like the 9 marks of a healthy church. I encourage you guys, you can Google that. I think those are some healthy judgments of what a biblical church is. But then some of these things can refine our decisions beyond that. So focus on things like biblical preaching of the word. Focus on things like healthy church membership. And after you've found churches that fit within that, I think after that we can refine our decisions between multiple through these kinds of things. But that shouldn't be our first and foremost guiding factor.
That's some good things to think through. And you got to ask the question, who's leading the home here? Has God called the children to lead the home, or has he called the parents? And I've had a conversation about this a couple of times with a good friend, and his idea was like, well, if the kid gets older and he wants to go to such and such church and he's growing, then why not go? And while I'm sympathetic, at the same time, that's letting that child and sort of just make the decision. And what about the relationships that you as the parent have with other people in the church, and that your child may already have at the current church? Now, there can certainly be good reasons to leave a church. But, and just another thing, I mean, the parents ought to know better than the child what the child needs spiritually. There are going to be exceptions. You got an unbelieving parent or something who's just sort of tagging along. But generally, and God's design is that you know better what the child needs spiritually. And so, that like you said, it can just set up some very bad trajectory. Well, Tony, this is I guess in some ways an uncomfortable topic, and it's just one that I continue to wrestle through. And so I was looking forward to going over this with you, and I think it will just prompt me to think further. And I hope it's been helpful for our listeners as they consider these things as well. So thanks for talking with me today, and thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Theological Family Ministry Podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, please give us a review on iTunes and share the podcast with your friends on social media. All new episodes are available to listen to on Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, Spreaker, and iTunes. We hope you have a great week, and join us again every first and third Thursday.